with me, I have two distinguished guests, Brett Weisel from ECDAN and Ben Hewitt from Theirworld. So Brett Weisel is the Global Policy and Advocacy Lead for ECDAN, and ECDAN stands for Early Childhood Development Action Network. And Ben Hewitt is the Senior Campaigns Advisor at Theirworld and the Act for the Early Years campaign. Actually, what will this session explore? This session will explore how can we leverage global partnerships and advocacy to create sustained change, ensuring that every child, no matter where they are born, has the opportunity to thrive. It's about harnessing the power of collaboration to influence policies, mobilize resources, and scale innovations that make a real difference. And we all know, when I use these concepts, what we are talking about. We very much hope that such global movements will link even more strongly in the near future to the work in the different continents or regions. And through the regional networks, also support at country, at community level. So I would first like to invite Brett, because he has also prepared some slides, right? I'll invite Brett to give us his view on driving change from the global level. So please, Brett.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk a little bit about the global level and how we're going to drive change collectively. And so before we begin, I wanted to sort of take a moment to reflect on the global context facing young children and their families. And we're in the midst of what we are calling a polycrisis, which is multiple simultaneous interconnected crises that have really had a major disruption on services for children and on family well-being. And we saw that very firsthand with COVID-19 in terms of the disruption of services and the resulting 10% increase in child poverty that was due to the economic shock. We see inequality on the rise as well. And so we also see climate change fundamentally changing the Earth. And we know that young children are particularly vulnerable to climate change. We see conflict on the rise, and more children in need of support in crisis settings than since World War II. We're also seeing geopolitical fractures and multilateralism on the decline. And we see factionalism and isolationism rise and impacting how governments fundamentally work together and collaborate. And then, of course, we're seeing new technologies emerge that have potential but also pose risk. And so, this polycrisis, I think, has really reinforced the fundamental theme of this conference, which is we need to take a systems change approach. No one organization, no one ministry can address these challenges alone, right? And so the result is this need for a collaborative and collective approach. And networks like ISA and ECDAN can and must foster that collaboration. And so, in terms of ECDAN and how we work, we are powered by partners and networks at the global, national, and regional levels. And we act as a conduit to facilitate knowledge exchange and to mobilize advocacy actions at each level. And part of what we need to do is lift up and link to the amazing work that is happening by all of you. And so you see that with the work of the regional networks, and you see ISA really leading on things like areas like systems change and on workforce, or the ECD workforce. You see the Africa Network focused on areas like childcare and engaging with the Africa Union. You see the Arab Network, who is way ahead in terms of climate change and elevating the need for young children to be recognized within the climate change discourse. And of course, the Arab Network has continued to shine a light on the need to prioritize children in crisis settings. And so we must work together to amplify this work and engage at the global level and influence decision makers at all levels. And so just really quick background on the Early Childhood Development Action Network. We were formed in 2016 by UNICEF, the World Bank, and 80 other partners, and our mission is simply to catalyze collective action with and for young children. And so it was within this polycrisis context that ECDAN went through a strategic planning process. Some of you may have been part of that process, and it's important to remember that this strategy that emerged from that process is not ECDAN's strategy, it's not the ECDAN Secretariat strategy, it's everybody's strategy, it's everybody in the field. And I hope you all see yourselves in it. Through that consultative process, we were encouraged to update our joint vision, which is, as you know, we envision a world where every young child is well-nourished, healthy, happy, and safe. And through that process, 3 core collaborative objectives emerged. The first is around building a movement to catalyze collective action. The second is to facilitate knowledge and learning exchange. And the third is to advocate for action to build political will and public demand. And so what does that look like in practice? We cannot influence the global agenda alone. You do that through collective action and collaboration. And so we put together collaborative initiatives on a range of different issue areas. You see some of those represented here in terms of the G20 commitment to early childhood development. You see the nurturing care framework and the development that went into that. ECDAN has a collaborative initiative around childcare. We're part of the global initiative to support parents. We're partnering with Theirworld on the Act for Early Years campaign. And I'll let Ben talk about that in a bit. And so the point is that we must work together to elevate these issues and influence decision makers at the global level. And so it also means we need to provide a platform for emerging issues or issues that are perhaps underrepresented. A number of those issues came through during our consultative process with partners. And one of those that really came loud and clear was ECD financing. Again, working with Theirworld on ensuring that donors are investing in the early years, and we're highlighting the need for that. Climate change, I hope, is not seen as an emerging issue, but for many partners working in the ECD field, it is in terms of understanding what are the key messages, what are the advocacy entry points, what is the positioning, what does the science say? And so we really must, as a community and as a field, lean into climate change and the advocacy that's needed there. And new technology in terms of artificial intelligence and others also comes to light in terms of a need. And beyond utilizing AI to generate bedtime stories for my young children at night, I am completely unprepared to understand what the role of AI will play in my children's future. And so perhaps that's an area that we need to come together as a community and discuss what is our shared approach, what are the shared messages. And we also must build the field. We need to make resources easy for the field to leverage and to utilize. And so ECDAN is committed to developing thematic hubs on different areas within early childhood development. We're also committed to maintaining a community platform for early childhood professionals and ensuring the field is kept abreast of the latest evidence, research, reports, initiatives, et cetera. We need to also ensure that practitioners have what they need, and we're learning from one another. And so many of you hopefully have participated in some of our learning events, from webinars and conferences and workshops and that sort of thing. And the importance here is cross-regional learning and learning from one another and breaking down those regional barriers, breaking down those country silos and ensuring we are all learning from one another. What works in Bulgaria may very well work in the Philippines and creating processes and opportunities to share and learn from one another. We also must invest in the next generation of early childhood professionals. ECDAN has a Knowledge Fellows program where we create opportunities for early years professionals to learn, to connect with one another, and receive professional development opportunities. they also work on a project that helps to advance ECDAN's learning agenda. And hope some of you might be interested in participating in that program. We'll have a new cohort in 2025. And of course, my specialty area is advocacy, and we must advocate for action. And you know, all of us in this room are advocates, and we all represent young children and their families, and we need to take that job seriously. We've had some important wins recently, too. We are building momentum. We saw the commitment by the G20 on early childhood development. We saw the inclusion of childcare in the World Bank's IDA and the launch of the Invest in Childcare initiative. We see the Transforming Education Summit, the Tashkent Declaration. Last year, for the first time, children were recognized at COP and in the climate agreements, and there was an agreement to continue the discussion with an expert dialogue that was held in June. And these things don't just happen. They happen because of advocacy. And it's important to remember that as a community, we cannot let these wins, these victories, be documents, be words on paper. We have to continue to build the political pressure to ensure that these commitments are financed and they're implemented. We cannot let them just be moments in time. And then, of course, we must support civil society. And we do that through developing tools, through mobilizing partners on calls to action that connect into some of those advocacy opportunities that you just saw. We also must support civil society in terms of capacity strengthening. And recognize that we can't just finance policies, we can't just finance interventions. We have to finance the movement behind those policies, and that means supporting civil society, both in terms of funding and in terms of capacity strengthening, and really building skills around how do we engage policymakers, how do we mobilize the public demand, and how do we deliver important policy wins that we're all working on. So you see here ways to engage with ECDAN. You can be part of our collaborative initiatives. You can join, receive our newsletter and the advocacy updates that we send. And just important to remember that driving change at the global level will happen from the bottom up. It happens with the grassroots level, into the country level, into the regional level, and builds political momentum all the way up to the global level. And on the flip side, by influencing the global agenda, we can create policy opportunities and financing opportunities at the regional and national level. And so it connects all the way through. And ECDAN hopes to serve as a conduit for that advocacy and for that knowledge sharing. And I leave you with a quote. We saw this at a restaurant in Dar es Salaam, an Ethiopian restaurant. Ben was actually there. I think it was your recommendation for the restaurant. And the quote is, "When spiders unite, they can tie down a lion." And when we saw that, we thought, what a great description for a network approach. And so let's build on this momentum that ISSA has created, and let's work together to tie down that lion. And that's all I have.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Brett. I like this proverb very much, and I think around this we can really discuss, how we can align our different strategies on the global level and on the regional level to actually come to real change at the community level, at the civil society level. Okay, I won't spend much time on commenting here because I want to invite Ben to give his view on things, and I know he's very experienced also in campaigning at the global level. So please, Ben, this is your pitch now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is this working? Hi, everyone. My name's Ben Hewitt, and I'm with Theirworld, and a bit taller. Thank you very much. It's really helpful to have Brett talk first about the breadth of work and coordination underway at ECDAN. And one of the pieces of the strategy that he was laying out was around movement building, and one of those is a public-facing campaign called Act for Early Years. So I wanted to just share a bit of that with everyone today. When we were looking at the strategy for campaigning and how do we build a global movement, we did a bit of research across 2021 and 2022 about events and activity outside of the early childhood sector. So we were looking at kind of UN meetings or World Bank meetings. We were looking at some budgets. We were looking at speeches from the heads of donor governments. We were looking at their tweets. And early childhood was almost invisible as a core theme in a lot of those areas. And other movements you could see, something that is so important in terms of the climate movement, in terms of gender equity, were right in the centre of a lot of these meetings and events and strategies, and to the point where it just wouldn't be legitimate to have such a UN day that didn't look at this through a gender lens, that wasn't looking at the impacts of climate. But then early childhood was missing. And there's something that we were looking at that point that says we want to get to that point where it's not legitimate to be talking about tackling inequality, tackling poverty, looking at climate, looking at gender equity, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals as a whole, without recognising a core strategy to achieving those is investment in the early years. And so this was quite fundamental in the thinking around a campaign. And the other piece was that the young children were missing. So there were no young children talking to the decision makers. You've got a challenge with this age group that you don't have on other youth issues and child issues. And so we were really kind of cautious about that and aware of that as a fundamental issue. And even in designing the brand of this campaign, we asked young children to be creating the font that was created in countries all around the world that we've created into a child font that you'll see throughout this. But also, how are young children in the room? Is it through caregivers? Is it through parents? Is it through the workforce? And these are really, really important questions about authenticity. And when we're looking at how decisions are made that are affecting young people, or challenging the fact that they're missing from a number of major international forums and processes. So we've worked for the last year and a half on creating the Act for Early Years campaign, and I think you'll recognise a number of the organisations involved in creating what we've called the roadmap, but the Moving Minds Alliance, who are here, Dr. Hassan, who is here from the Arab Network, Liana, in terms of the network here that everyone knows, and all of the advocacy and knowledge sharing work at ECDAN. And I won't spend too much time on the challenge because I think Brett set this out in great detail, but we're not on track for SDG 4.2, which is focused on school readiness. It's focused on child development and what needs to happen. And there actually isn't a plan to achieve it. If you say, where is the plan to achieve SDG target 4.2? We've got lots of activity underway, but where's the finance? Where's the plan? How are we tracking it? Where's all the data? And there's just big gaps in this process that you actually see in place in other areas. And the bigger challenge as well is we know that inequality is on the rise. A number of the Sustainable Development Goals that are so crucial are on the rise, and they're going in the wrong direction. So this has brought us together as a like-minded network of organisations wanting to create more of a public-facing campaign to build this movement that puts the youngest children at the centre of some of the international processes and the international events that are underway. So a few things that have happened over the past year. One of them is, and a number of organisations will have joined this effort, but there's been a coordinated advocacy push with the Brazilian government as president of the G20. And this started with 150 organisations. We handed a joint letter by them to President Lula, who set the focus of the G20 on a fairer world. And we said you cannot tackle inequality without putting investment in early childhood at the centre. And this has been an advocacy track all this year that a lot of people have been involved with who are in this room and outside of this room. And the new Global Alliance against hunger and poverty that's going to be announced on November the 16th in Brazil now has a sprint, a focused area on early childhood. And this is because of that coordinated advocacy effort in Brazil and with G20 countries around the world. It is a really crucial step forward. There's a picture here with the UN Special Envoy Gordon Brown at the World Bank Spring Meetings, who was calling for a transformation in investment and started conversation with a number of key donors around early childhood. We've also shared a lot more data on this, so working with colleagues on tracking things like the Tashkent Declaration, which donors are spending 10% of their education funding on preschool, which countries are doing that, and holding governments and others to account. And then we've brought on high-profile partners, and you can see in this Roger Federer, Sesame, Lego, and others are behind this to say, how do we take this beyond our space on early childhood? How do we go out and make this that sense of global movement around early childhood that involves everyone who's concerned about this area? In terms of setting the vision and the roadmap, as I said, everybody's come together behind the SDG 4.2 target as a vision, and including in that the lifelong well-being. So it's not just about the school readiness, but it's about all the lifelong benefits that comes from achieving this goal. And then we set 3 campaign goals. And the first one is unashamedly more investment. This is a financing campaign. So we're really looking at the money. There are huge gaps everywhere you look, across citywide, nationwide, etc. A humanitarian context that we were discussing with Dr. Hassan and the Moving Mind Alliance today, huge gaps in financing in this area. So that's one of the goals. The other is around the political prioritization. So is this in the room? Are young children in the room? Are we talking to decision makers? Are they noticing this? Is there demand from a constituency for this to happen and change? And then the third goal is around future-proofing the global goals. So making sure that the transformations that we want to see start in the early years, and that is a central part of, I know it seems a long way away, but conversations will start soon about what happens after the SDGs. And then we thought, how do we popularise this? So on a number of the chairs, we've shared the minifesto. So we couldn't quite have a campaign manifesto. We had to have a childlike, playful minifesto, which you can all sign and add your backing to. But this has 3 calls within it. One of the challenges is that we go into meetings with leaders and we all have different ways into this issue. So we may approach this because our speciality is in primary healthcare, or it could be nutrition, or it could be health. And this was a key challenge in bringing this together. So what we've done is tried to package the full framework of interventions under 3 catalytic goals. And those are universal access to quality primary healthcare in support of health, well-being and development across pregnancy, birth and early childhood, universal access to quality inclusive preschool education, and universal support for families, including affordable and quality childcare, child benefits and parent and caregiver support. And behind these 3 goals, we've got the full framework of interventions and policies that are required in order for those to be delivered. And then this, I won't spend too much time because we'll a bit against time in this session, but this just gives you an idea of some of the moments and international forums that are coming up where we're looking to influence, we're looking to have a presence. And we can't do this without bringing the evidence and the voice from partners around the world. But there's a number of events and activities here, from the G20 to the World Bank Spring Meetings to the 2nd World Summit on Social Development. These are all happening, and I've put underneath that you've also got a number of regional and national key campaign moments and opportunities, notwithstanding the huge emergencies and humanitarian challenges that we're facing in a number of parts around the world. So what we're trying to do is coordinate and support coordination on this so that we as a movement come with a unified voice to leaders, that they're seeing a community demanding action in this area, that there's accountability for when decisions are made, and aiming to see progress in these areas. So 4 ways that we're operationalising the campaign. The first is around how we can connect with localized campaigns. So if there's an opportunity with what campaigns and advocacy activities are underway, citywide, region-wide, nationwide, there's an opportunity to connect with the global movement. And this can, where there's an opportunity to provide support in terms of communications, campaigning materials, and other content and partnerships, then that's available, and that's something we're rolling out. And over the next 6 months, Liana and I, with a whole range of groups, are looking at what can we do in this area. You know, what is our focus with the European Commission? What is our focus in terms of how we might be able to support national campaigns and regional campaigns? So there's an opportunity to connect with you on that. The second of these advocacy tracks that we've called them. So ensuring that we've got clarity about what we're calling for in these meetings, and then building the activity around achieving these goals in those advocacy tracks. And again, opportunity to connect on those areas. The third area is supporting campaign champions, and one of the things that we're doing is we're training 2,000 global youth ambassadors around the world as advocates on early childhood, and these are in over 130 countries, and we're making sure that the voice of young people is heard, but they're advocating for the youngest children. And it's really interesting working with this group of exceptional advocates who come into this issue from climate issues, from gender equity issues, a range of issues, but then they're able to articulate why investing in early childhood is a key strategy for unlocking those issues. And then there's a number of other champions that we're working with in order to create voice and awareness around this issue. And then the fourth one is around the campaign movement. So we're going to do a lot of digital campaigning, things that individuals, parents, caregivers, the workforce can be involved in. The key aim of that is to show demand for this issue and to show politicians that this is a growing issue that's getting social media attention, advocacy attention. So 4 areas that we're looking to now operationalise the campaign in partnership. I've got some minifestos on each of the seats. Feel free to go online, sign up for them, share them, take them. We've also got lots of translated versions, but that's an entry point into the campaign. And then in the partners section, organisations can look at toolkits and other things. But thank you for the opportunity to share this with you, and look forward to chatting further about it.
Well, thank you in the first place to both Ben and Brett, that they stayed really within our really tight time frame, I must say. This was one of our major concerns here, because we had just a short session. But I think what is important in both presentations is that we need to find ways, of linking your efforts on the global level to actually, link it to the many organizations that are here that work on the local level. And we have the networks here, so the networks, I think, can play there a very important role. But we must really find ways of linking that very important global work that you do with what all the layers that are beneath there, because we want to see actually the change happen at the local level with the children and the families. And I think this continues to be really a challenge. I mean, I've been in this field in the 1990s, the early 1990s, and I see, how things move, and it's still important that we have that impact on the local level. So thank you very much for being with us, and for also using this as a networking opportunity.